in terms of Lebanon, Israel has no territorial dispute with Lebanon. Israel would be thrilled if Lebanon acted like a sovereign country to control of its territory. And then I believe that
they at least have the whatever Shaba Farms dispute, right?
And whenever Israel faced a clear and concrete choice for peace, for two states, it has always been willing to give up territory, to divide the land. And it's important for me to emphasize that this has nothing to do with...
I mean, that, like, in the intro they mentioned, like, well, this is like one of the big sources of conflict, is it seems like Palestinians have always been trying to get, you know, take borders from one war ago.
I don't see that same kind of, like, global issue.
I get this is actually a good point. Damn, she's right. Damn. Yeah, we don't see this. I mean, we do see Kurdish terrorism in both Syria and a little bit more in Turkey, but I mean, clearly, yeah, it's not this as big of like a global issue. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to help with the algorithm, and consider sending a donation through YouTube Super Thanks to directly support the channel, and I'll make sure to reply. This is from like 3 days ago by now, but it's Destiny versus this girl who's like some ultra pro Zionist. Oh wait, is this the video of the person tearing down the Greece flags? Yeah.
Yeah, shit. And I'm about to come back and put Free Palestine.
This is
Free Palestine, bitch. Look, what you looking at? You know damn well there's a genocide. You know there's a...
You know, well, it's kind of interesting. Oh boy. Yeah, but we gotta check this out. Hopefully.
Rest of the world and Palestine.
Hopefully, this isn't too insane. We'll see.
Of what they learned through
I don't trust her. I don't trust.
Are so good at communicating with the Western world.
Everybody split their land.
Yeah, but everybody fought over splitting their land. I agree, I understand they're not special. Yeah, everybody splits it, but everybody fights over it too.
Exactly.
I'm sorry, let me be super clear. The Arabs have always rejected, to the enjoyment of Israel, have always rejected the existence of an independent Israeli state. Full stop, period. There's a reason why people see
real.
We wouldn't answer that question when I asked, like, oh, well, how you know, in 52, I think, what kind of two-state solution do you think would look fair to the Palestinian side?
So those are two different questions. To your first question.
All right. So Einat Wilf and Stephen Bennell, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
There's a lot going on in the Middle East, and I want to understand your perspectives on it. And is Israel doing the right thing? Are there mistakes being made? How do we move forward to get this conflict ultimately resolved? Einat, what do you think?
So in terms of how the conflict gets resolved in the end, I think we need to understand that this is not going to be anything small. The conflict will have to be resolved on three elements. The first, probably the big conflict with Iran does not end until the Ayatollah regime is gone. For the simple reason that as long as the ideology of the Ayatollahs is death to Israel, it's not exactly a negotiable position with which we can live. So in terms of the conflict, it could ebb, it could flow, but ultimately it could only end if the Ayatollah regime and the ideology end. And of course, I could say a lot of Israelis are very much looking forward to being good friends with the Iranians once more. In terms of Lebanon, Israel has no territorial dispute with Lebanon. Israel would be thrilled if Lebanon acted like a sovereign country to control of its territory. And then I believe that
they at least have the whatever Shaba Farms dispute, right?
Not useless ceasefire.
Isn't there? So there's this dispute over the Golan Heights. I think Lebanon claims this as being their territory. I guess they don't have any right now, but they're probably gonna invade Lebanon again, right? I don't know if I would call it a territorial dispute, but there's also Nonfon. What's up? Welcome back, Malibu. But there's also the the whole issue of like the blue line, and Hezbollah never withdrew from southern Lebanon, right? I don't know. I guess Lebanon doesn't have a territorial dispute, but maybe Hezbollah does. Is it going to be her? Obviously, Hezbollah is a non-state actor. Okay, well, I can't fucking just payroll.
Worse than useless peacekeeping forces, not UN resolutions that nobody bothers to enforce until Israel actually starts to enforce it, and then everyone screeches ceasefire. This has to end with Lebanon assuming full sovereignty over its territory and making peace with Israel. And finally, in Gaza, the conflict ends when the ideology that has given birth to the conflict comes to an end, and it's an ideology that I've come to call Palestinianism, essentially the ideology that sovereignty in any part of the land. So Gaza is ultimately just the most recent bloody arena in the
Can we come up with, does that have to be the name? Does that have to be? You're not beating any allegations by giving it that name.
Conflict, and therefore that war and
that build like militia, like Hezbollah to push government to implement your welfare, embracing follows the political agenda. True.
Sovereignty in any part of the land. So again, an ideology dies, and hopefully peace is born.
Do you agree, Stephen?
Let's see. So for point one, something definitely has to change with Iran. I would be a little hesitant to say that the only way that a peaceful agreement can be made or some sort of lasting peace can happen is with the downfall of the
regime
Ayatollah.
change.
I know they don't enjoy a great deal of support among the population right now, but I think that kind of orienting yourself towards the collapse of the nation's regime is a little scary. It puts us in an awkward place. And by that, I mean, it just seems to, I guess, call for future conflict. Insofar as Lebanon goes, I'm not the most preeminent expert on Lebanon, but I don't think that the Lebanese government possesses the military capability of expelling Hezbollah from their country completely. I don't think that their lack of sovereignty right now is a choice. It's probably more that Hezbollah and their workings with Assad and their workings with the Ayatollah will allow them to remain so entrenched in power there. And then the defeat of the ideology of Palestinianism.
Israel can do it for them.
I guess insofar as Palestinians that deny Israel a right to exist, that ideology needs to be gone. But I mean, so too does the Zionist ideology that Palestinians can't exist in any like measured form in any kind of like mutually understood peace agreement where instead we've just seen kind of like more and more expansion of the West Bank, more and more military conflict with no end in sight to the occupation, the disputed territory, the lack of some kind of like finalized agreement or settlement between the two parties.
So, Stephen, you're saying that Zionist ideology...
to be fair, insofar as the whole like oppressor, oppressed, like power imbalance matters, like the Palestinian threat to Israel is like killing civilians. Obviously that's bad. Okay, obviously we're not like Hassan here. We don't defend that type of terrorism. But like the Israeli threat to Palestinians, it's actually being able to prevent them from forming a state. Like that's it. Like actually expanding settlements and annexing their territory. I say their territory. What they feel like is their territory. The West Bank and I guess the Golan Heights is Syrian. Yeah, like they're. I think that's kind of the steel man of the oppressor oppressing there.
To the extent that Zionist ideology means a rejection of Palestinian statehood must also go away. Einat, what do you think of that?
That was never part of the Zionist ideology. Zionism is quite simply the political movement for the liberation and self-determination of the Jewish people in their ancestral homeland. From the beginning, Zionist thinkers have made it clear that they want to live
Israel has no right to
Arabs,
exist.
not
It's
instead of them.
enslaving
It was never an
citizens to put them
ideology of
into
negation or
defense
rejection,
security
which is why
apparatus
when you
under
go
the
back
guise
a
of permanent threat from everywhere.
Going back to the
True.
original two-state solution, the one that created Transjordan, the Zionist leaders have always agreed to every two-state solution as long as one of the two is the Jewish state. And the Arabs, the Palestinians, have always rejected every two-state solution if one of the two is the Jewish state. So I agree that there are Israelis that have another vision, but ultimately you judge nations like you judge people on the decisions that they make when they actually face a choice. People can say that they want A and B and C, but you really know who they are when they face a choice between A and B. And whenever Israel faced a clear and concrete choice for peace, for two states, it has always been willing to give up territory, to divide the land. And it's important for me to emphasize that this has nothing to do with...
I mean, that like in the intro they mentioned like this is like one of the big sources of conflict. Is it seems like Palestinians have always been trying to get, take borders from one war ago. So like I think they mentioned like the negotiations during after the 1948 war in like 51, 52 in the intro. Like part of the issue with that is that all the Arab states were semi-willing to negotiate with Israel, but only on the basis that they return to the UN partition borders and not the new borders that they have secured after the 48 war.
Or being moral. I don't believe such things exist in international relations. It simply has to do with the fact of our numerical minuteness. The Jewish people, given the hugely successful Muslim and Arab conquests of the Levant and North Africa in the 7th century, it means that as long as the Jews are Zionists, as long as the Jews care about being a sovereign people in their ancestral homeland, in any part of it, they are destined or damned, choose your word, to remain an ethnic, linguistic, religious, and national minority in an Arab and Islamic Middle East, which is why we always agree to compromises. Again, not because we're nice, not because it would be what we would do if we were 1 billion Jews, but as long as we're 7 million Jews, surrounded by 500 million Arabs and nearly 2 billion Muslim, who, despite very positive developments in some places of the Arab world, remain by and large committed to what Abba even called policide, the non-existence of the Jews as a sovereign people, then we will always say yes. So Palestinianism, as the ideology of rejecting the Jewish state, has always been at the core of the conflict.
God, come up with a
that
name.
ideology
Come up
has
with
to
a different
die.
name. Please,
We
come
will
up with a
always
different
say
name.
yes to any
Please.
peace with people.
Please,
who want to
this is she's gonna become the next Asmongold, guys. Oh no.
rather than instead of us.
What about what Israelis are doing in the West Bank, Stephen?
Well, I mean, I don't disagree with anything that was said. I mean, you, obviously, if you're looking for a mutual solution, you can't call Palestinianism and then like an ideology of rejectionism and label it as you want, and then say, well, this is what Zionism is. I mean, I'm sure you're more familiar than I am with how many people so desperately want to relabel Zionism as meaning, ideology committed to ethnic superiority, or committed to ethnic cleansing and genocide, or committed to the expulsion of all Arabs from the Levant, or committed to the infinite expansion of Israel, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. People will define Zionism however they want in order to hate Israel, hate Jews, whatever, which is obviously not productive. I would just say that calling an ideology like, well, we need to be anti-Palestinian or we need to reject Palestinianism, I just think is not productive. I do agree that you have to reject this idea of people that reject any kind of nation of Israel, or more specifically, a country that is interested in protecting the ethnic, I guess, Jewish people, as broad as that's become. I agree that that type of ideology needs to be rejected, but I just saying that we need to have a rejection of Palestinian ideology, I think is a pretty harsh and unproductive term. And I think that people on the Palestinian side are going to hear that as a dog whistle for, oh, you just want to subjugate us or kick us out completely, the same way that people on that side hear, Zionism as, like, oh, that's just a conquesting, expansionist term for you guys trying to kick all this out or whatever. I reject, I guess, the terminology there, but I don't think I reject any of the underlying ideas unless the terminology is being used to sneak in other underlying ideas.
It might be just a semantic thing. I mean, we both agree that Palestinians who want peace for both peoples, like we believe in their right to have a state, and we both agree that Israelis who use the term Zionism as meaning just wanting a home for the Jewish state, we support that as well, and we just disagree with anyone who stands on either side and rejects peace with the other.
Prison as a punishment for refusing to serve is a cause to delegitimize a national project for the 21st century. I don't think mandatory subscription is it, like mandatory inscription or whatever. It's not. Is it inscription? Subscription? Fuck. Is it? I don't. There are a lot of states that do. Fucking Finland does that. Finland is a social democracy and they do that. Like, it's just not like that. It's just not that big of a deal. Mandatory service. Yeah, like Finland does mandatory service too. Like, I'm pretty sure I think Germany used to. I think they stopped doing it. I think Germany did it until like 2009 or something. Like a lot of countries do this. Like, and it makes the most sense for Israel to do it because they're a relatively small nation. So constantly engaged in war with Arab states. Your attitude is insane. Do you think Finland is an illegitimate country just because Finland has mandatory service?
I mean, I don't like dismissing things as semantics. Language is important. It's arguably the thing that makes us human, right? Language is one of the most important things that we have, and a lot of people use semantics. Again, I mean, if you're familiar with Jewish dog whistling, right? Like they, them, or whatever, like people use semantics to sneak in a lot of garbage. So I would be uncomfortable, I guess, siding with anybody that says we need to reject Palestinian ideology because it's like, well, hold on, what does that mean? Because in one crowd you might say like, well, that just means that we need to reject the people who don't accept that an Israeli state can exist that is interested in the protection of Jewish people. And that's, I think that would be the message that I think people would hear when you say that, yeah.
What are you thinking?
So I agree the language is important, but it's actually, this is something that is more empirical. It's not about kind of...
I'm not saying you like Finland. I'm just asking, like, do you think it's a totally illegitimate nation?
But it actually has no legs to stand on. If people want to look, I have my longer talk, which I kind of go through the history of, and my personal history of also believing that the only thing that stood between us and peace are things that have to do with territory. So ending the occupation, Palestinian statehood, no settlements, only to discover again and again that what stands between us and peace is the Palestinian ideology that rejects wholly and totally the existence of a sovereign Jewish state anywhere in any part of the land between the river and the sea. And I always, as I go through that, I'm sure you know, and we talked about it, I think, last time as well, I bring this quote by Ernst Bevin, the British foreign minister after World War II, and this will also begin to address the West Bank question. He goes to the British Parliament in February 1947 to explain why Britain failed out to fulfill the mandate to help the Jews achieve a state. It didn't fail the Arabs, there's Jordan, there's Iraq, but it fails the Jews. And he needs to explain why. And he says His Majesty is thus faced with an irreconcilable conflict. Now, he calls it irreconcilable in February 1947. In February 1947, there's no occupation of the West Bank and Gaza. The West Bank is not yet called the West Bank because Jordan has not yet created and annexed it. There are no settlements, there's no occupation, there's no blockade of Gaza, there's no Gaza Strip as such. There are no Arab refugees because they haven't yet waged war, there's no state of Israel. So all the things that we bring today as the reasons, the causes for the Palestinian anger, grievances, violence don't exist yet, which is why this is so valuable. Because already in February 1947, he says His Majesty's government is thus faced with an irreconcilable... I
would imagine, I don't know if we have public opinion polls from fucking 47. I would imagine, on the whole, Palestinians have gotten more accepting of an Israeli state. I mean, the PLO recognized Israel in what, 1988 or whatever? I think it was 1988. Because they declared independence and they recognized Israel. Like, I'm pretty sure a lot of Palestinians have come around to the idea of a two-state solution, at least formally, except for... I mean, Hamas really only accepts it as their whatever temporary basis, and also Hamas is probably not going to be negotiating with Israel that much longer, considering all their leaders are now dead. But,
calls it irreconcilable when nothing exists in terms of West Bank or settlements or all that. And yet, and then he goes on to say, the reason that the conflict is irreconcilable between the Jews and Arabs in the land, he says, is because for the Jews, the top priority is to establish a sovereign Jewish state. So that's Zionism. That's actually a clear definition. The political movements for self-determination. The Jews want statehood, sovereignty for the Jewish people and nation and their ancestral homeland. Doesn't have to be all of it, can be part of it. This is why the Jews say yes to multiple partition proposals. And then he goes on to say, and the Arabs, and they're not yet called Palestinians, but they will be one day. And he goes on to say, and the Arabs in the land, their top priority, remember, is to resist to the last the establishment of Jewish sovereignty in any part of the land.
Sure.
So already in February 47, he understands that what unites the Arabs of the land, the Palestinians later to be called, is the rejection of Jewish sovereignty as a top priority. I have come to call that Palestinianism. You can call it anti-Zionism, Arab anti-Zionism, rejection of Jewish sovereignty. But
please just call it. Please just don't call it Palestinianism. You're not winning over any protesters, any Gen Zers by calling it Palestinianism, please. Although I guess if you just label it anti-Zionism, people are gonna always just be on board with it. But
fortunately, in the last century, there are no exceptions to that ideology. There have no leaders, but not even any notable voices among the Palestine Arabs who have put forth a vision of wanting to live next to a Jewish state rather than prioritizing the non-existence of a Jewish state. So in that sense, I think I'm on very solid ground when I'm saying that this ideology, however you call it, of rejecting the Jewish state anywhere between the river and the sea is what unites and connects the Palestinians.
What, in 47,
the Zionist infighting right here.
Or why was it said that there were irreconcilable differences? Where did that stem from?
Because by definition, if the Jews want a state and the Arabs want the Jews not to have a state, that's irreconcilable. You cannot negotiate that. He's not saying the Jews want a state, the Arabs want a state, and we just need some help dividing the land equitably. He says, as a matter of top priority, the Jews want a state, and the Arabs want the Jews not to have a state. Now,
where did the feelings come from? Why did they not want the Jews to have a state there?
Okay, so that's really a question that a lot of people, once they internalize that this is at the core of the conflict, and a lot of people ask exactly this question, then why? Why for a century divert all your significant
What is she just going to say? They're all anti-Semitic?
To the destruction of the Jewish state. And here, there are a couple of explanations. I think some changing demographics have to do with it, but I think it's a very small reason. I can explain later why. I think the biggest reason has to do with the sociology and theology of the Arab world at that moment. I'm saying at that moment because I still believe in the possibility of change. At that moment, in the late 19th, early 20th century, the Arab world has spent about 1,200, 1,300 years when it has known only one kind of Jew. A Jew who is dispossessed, stateless, essentially in exile. Kingdom is long lost, 6, 7 centuries earlier. Meek, weak. So as the Arabs kind of sweep across the Levant and North Africa and conquer them and make them Arab and Muslim, they give the Jew a certain role in that
society. Do we really need, can at least like one of the three, okay, be like, these are like, European settlers coming over, buying their land and only hiring Jewish people to work the land with the intention of forming a state. Like there are like definitely some legitimate grievances there that we can come up with, right? Can that be at least one of the three, or are we only going to do the Arabs have only ever known a dispossessed Jew?
The Jews are not pagans, so they cannot be Islamized by the sword. But they're not Muslims, right? I sometimes joke that from the Muslim perspective, the Jews are the people that got the first book right, but not the sequels. So the Jews are accorded a status called dhimmi, which places them as lower in the hierarchy and status of Arab and Muslim societies. And there are many, many factors that single out the dhimmi status. Yellow, for example, doesn't come from Europe or Nazi Germany. It comes from the Muslim world. But my two favorite examples of the dhimmi status is that the Jews could not ride horses in the Arab world. Horses were a mark of dignity. They were actually also a weapon of war. So Jews could only ride donkeys. And Jews, of course, could not carry arms, because the very definition of dhimmi was that the defense of the Jew was the prerogative of the Arab and Muslim ruler. Sometimes more, sometimes less, but the prerogative of the Arab and Muslim ruler. Now, if you look at the early images of Zionism from the early 20th century, the first things that immediately jump at you is that those Jews ride horses and carry arms. Imagine the sociological, theological, cultural shock.
Okay, how long are we going to
having people whom for 1,200, 1,300 years you were used to looking down upon, that as far as you were concerned, it was a law of nature, that those people were below you, they were defenseless, they had certain markers, and those people are rising in the name of this ideology of Zionism to say, we are your equals, we will defend ourselves by ourselves. I write a lot about comparing feminism and Zionism as movements of liberation. And
oh my God, we get it.
The violent response to Jews challenging their inferior role in society is a violent response that demands that the Jews, so to speak, go back to their proper place as meek, weak, and powerless.
Okay, that was a lot. I feel like we're missing a really big part of the puzzle here, though, which is before the Ottoman Empire collapsed in the late 1800s, I think started around the 1880s, and then going to the very, very early 1900s, you had these kind of fed waves of early migration from Jewish people, a lot from the Eastern Russian Empire. some from Europe that tried to go to the Levant, but ultimately failed for a variety of reasons. Then in the early 1900s, especially after 1917, when the Ottoman Empire collapsed, when Britain gets this mandate for Palestine, and then when the Jewish people, the Zionists of Europe, secured the Balfour Declaration, right, which was a promise from the United Kingdom to establish some kind of home for the Jewish people in, I guess what we call today Israel/Palestine, in the mandatory Palestine area, you had out of nowhere a whole bunch of Jewish people that were now starting to immigrate, backed by Zionist money from other people around the world that came in, that were buying land from Arabs there, and we're slowly starting to build villages, we're slowly starting to build cities, and we're starting to grow in significant number. I think that there was probably a fear, I think a reasonable one, that you had this Ottoman Empire that collapsed, you had a bunch of now kind of like scattered Arabs in all these different states that had once seen themselves as potentially being part of this kind of like pan-Arab nation, right? Ideas that would later be pursued militarily by people like Nasser, by people like Saddam Hussein, and now because you have all of these, what they perceive as European Jews that were coming into the Levant, they were, I think, reasonably worried that, like, oh shoot, we're not going to have a country the same way that people up in Iraq were getting a country, or people over in Syria, or the monarchy over in Jordan, or the people in Egypt are getting states. Now we're having to split it with all of these European Jews coming in. There were several white papers that the United Kingdom commissioned to figure out, well, what's the progress going on in the mandatory Palestine area, which was the name for the mandate that the UK or Britain had for that territory, where the idea was they were going to rule it for some period of time, then hand it over to whatever state kind of emerged as a stable state from there. And I think that the people living there, the Arab people / Palestinians, that identity was just kind of starting to form in like the 20s and 30s with the Mufti in Jerusalem, kind of, but not really strongly until, as a response, especially to the Jewish people immigrating in. I think the Arabs reasonably were worried about all the Jews coming in, and that's why in 47, when the Peel Commission happened, right, that paper that you're referring to, where they say, well, now we think partition is impossible, was because of the growing tensions between the Jewish people and the Arab people there. A lot of the violence, I think, prior to 47, instigated by the Arabs, especially prior to 1940, instigated by the Arabs, but a lot of fear that a lot of Jewish people were coming in that had been basically guaranteed the ability to travel in from the Brits. Not to say that any of this justifies violence today, or that this necessarily changes anything you said, but I think it adds a little dimension to why people were afraid. It's not that Arabs or what would become the Palestinians just started off as like, God, we hate Zionists and Jews, and although Muslims kind of did, but it didn't start off that way. It started off, I think, more with kind of like, well, here's all of these people that are coming into this territory, and now we feel like we're going to lose what could be our potential state in the way that the other Arab forming states around us are getting one.
Okay, so I'll address it in a few ways. If that were the case,
she had to put her glasses on for that one.
Every single Arab state was not happy with what they got. I once saw this little cute app or video that showed every country in the world, and especially in Europe, but every country in the world at its zenith. So every country, how much territory it had in its kind of the historical height. And the amazing thing is that every country in the world today has a history where it views itself, or was it, as much, much larger. Even little Luxembourg was once, I don't know, about a third of Europe. So if the claim is that the Arab total rejection of a Jewish state in any borders, right? It's not a fight over the size of the Jewish state. It's about no Jewish sovereignty. And the phrasing is Jewish sovereignty. So it's about the Jews being sovereign. This is why I think it's more about the status of the Jews rather than, more specific things. Then every country in the world would be in eternal war because it believes it should have gotten more. The Iraqis thought they should have gotten more. The Jordanians, the Syrians, the Lebanese, it doesn't matter. So this in itself does not make sense.
It's not entirely wrong, but look, Destiny already addressed the point that, like, obviously he doesn't think like any of this justifies violence today.
That cannot be the reason. The other thing about the changing demographics, one of my favorite things, first of all, there was the Jewish immigration before. As people know, in the 19th century, Jerusalem is a Jewish majority state, but really the rise in the Arab population of the mandate area, amazingly, in the years 1930, 31, 32, the rise in the Arab population of the mandate is the highest rise of the population anywhere in the world. And a lot of people for many years thought that this had to do with immigration, with Arab.
I mean, that's when in Britain, after the first Palestinian Arab Revolt, right? Didn't they start restricting Jewish immigration to the mandate, right? I don't know how long that continued, but it probably continued until the 30s, right? And then the second Arab Revolt was in, 30 to 36? So
Arab immigration into the mandate area, spurred on by what you described, the fact of prosperity, the investment that came with Zionism and the ideology of creating a Jewish state. But what's amazing, and hopefully this can be shown, or maybe you can then put a link, but if you can see a bit, you can see two maps here. The two-toned map is the partition map, and the blue and light blue is the incidence of malaria in the early 20th century. So what you see, it's almost 1-to-1. I have also another map that shows that this is also the map of land ownership. So basically, the Jews purchase malaria-infested land, mostly from absentee landlords, and they eradicate malaria, bringing science. They're one figure in particular, an ardent Zionist, who brought about the eradication of malaria. And actually, the rise in the Arab population in the 30s is in large part due to the eradication of malaria. So the demographic changes actually are as much a part of Zionism actually leading to the rise in Arab demography. There are more Arabs. So again, to claim that there was a fear, that makes no sense. And ultimately, even if there was a fear that they will not get a state, then you can't explain why, once they are given two opportunities, in 1937 with the Peel Commission, to have an Arab state on 70% of the land, and the Jews were only given 17%, the rest was going to be international.
I don't even think that's...
And in 1947, when they are offered this map
but...
where the Jews are essentially going to be given the lands that in which they eradicated malaria plus desert, and on both occasions, the Arabs, in their words, just in their words, we don't have to put ideas into them, say very clearly that it's more important for them that the Jews not have a state. And by the way, they say that. They say that the Jews are not a people worthy of a state. They say that the Jews, this is not their appropriate status. They talk about the existence of Jewish sovereignty as a source of shame. But if they were merely concerned about having a state, they actually had clear and distinct opportunities to have a state. But not only have they rejected those opportunities every time, they went to brutal war between 36 and 39 and between 47 and 49. In both cases, in 36 and 39, unfortunately, they had a big political win in which they managed to prevent the establishment of a Jewish state on the eve of the Holocaust, which is why, in parentheses, I think they bear also great responsibility, at least for the fact that hundreds of thousands of Jews, if not more, did not have the state that they were supposed to have in the 30s. But ultimately, if their concern was about having a state, they should have done what the Jordanians and Iraqis and Syrians and Lebanese and the Luxembourgians did, which is accept a state, which is not everything, but is something. But the fact remains that it was always more important for them.
I mean, Palestinians were clearly put in a worse position than fucking Jordan and Lebanon were, but okay.
Their words, that the Jews not have a state than to have a state for themselves of any size.
Yeah, I mean, the Jordanians, the Iraqis, the Syrians, the Lebanese, the Egyptians, none of these people were asked to split their territory with what they saw as European transplants. Again, I don't deny that they rejected the existence of...
Anna, what did you say? What did you say?
What?
Oh, again, this is an imposition of a later view. They did not view them as European transplants. They understood very well that they are Jews. They knew what Jews are.
Sure, but they absolutely viewed them as European transplants. Right.
No, they viewed them as Jews who dared to challenge the appropriate order of being at the bottom.
Do you think that if it would have been British people or if it would have been any other group of people, you think they would have been okay with them moving there?
I think it would have been a much less emotional and a much shorter conflict, yes.
Steve, I don't want to get away from your first point. Your first point was that these other countries didn't have to split their territory with other people. So they were viewed as like Europeans. This idea that it was just because they were Jews is nonsense. There were a whole bunch of people that were being moved into their region of the world after they had lost to Britain, and they viewed it as basically, oh, you're bringing in a whole bunch of Europeans now. They were Jews, and Arabs and Jews do have a special relationship, of course, but I don't think that made it significantly worse. I think it could have been Christians, it could have been other types of people, it could have been Russians, it could have been Brits, it could have been Americans, it could have been anybody. They would have viewed it as an imposition on their land, that everybody around them, all those other countries you mentioned, all had their own territory. And as much as you might say, nobody was happy with what they were given, I don't believe there's been any border changes or territorial changes whatsoever since the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. Einat, you're trying to create an analogy to say the other countries didn't have the same reaction as the Palestinians, but I think what Stephen's saying is the other countries didn't have to split their territory. How do you think of that?
Well, everyone had to split their territory. That is the very essence of the breakdown of empires. Singling out the Palestine Arabs as somehow uniquely wronged is part of the revision of history.
Wait, who else had other people that came in en masse after 1917? Who else had a whole bunch of foreign people coming into their territory to live there?
That's not a whole bunch. A lot of the Arabs moved in as well throughout the 19th and the 20th century. There are population movements all around.
Yeah, but nothing. But within the Ottoman Empire, but not from Europe.
But again, this is, I believe, your imposition. The view is not that this is some kind of from Europe. The problem is that they are Jews. The problem is that in the Arab and Islamic understanding of what the Jews are supposed to be, the Jews of early Zionism are challenging the role of the Jews. If it had been any other people, I agree, you might have had conflict, as you had in many places, but it wouldn't have been so emotional, so total, so completely rejectionist, and ultimately people would have achieved some kind of resolution. But here, the desire...
I don't know. Listen, my history this far back is not the best. I don't really know who's right here. I don't have...
The desire to erase Jewish sovereignty in any part of the land, the view that Jewish sovereignty is shameful. That's the language they use. Shameful to the Arab sense of who they are. If you ignore the fact that they are Jews, you really, I think, don't go to the core of what drives this conflict.
Okay. I mean, I've talked about this in the past with Jake, and maybe even you, but I think that the revisionist history on both sides is part of the centerpiece of like the intractability of this conflict. That both sides are so invested in making the other side just seem purely evil or either anti-Arab or anti-Semitic to the core. When I think that a fair reading of history gives you a much more clear picture of what's happening. That you have a defeated people, the Arabs, the Turks, right? You've got the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, then you have mandates given to Britain, France to run territories, and then in one area you have tens of thousands and then hundreds of thousands of Europeans that come in, and you feel like, oh wow, we are getting completely and totally shafted. Was there a little bit more hatred because they were Jewish? Because Jewish people historically had, a certain view around the world, really, not even just in the Arab societies, but around the world, Jews were viewed as weak, as leaders on society, as bad people, or whatever, right? So I'm sure that hurt a little bit more, right? And Arabs saw themselves as proud, as warriors, and now they were being, they felt like they were being subjugated by these weak Jews, people that lived as dhimmi status in their societies. I don't disagree that might have fed into it a little bit, but that's like 5% of it. Like 95%. The idea that if it was just a huge group of like white Orthodox, Russians or a bunch of people from, Italy that had come in and they could have set up shop there, and Palestinian people or the Arabs or whatever in the Levant would have been like, oh, okay, well, you guys can make a state here, that's cool. It would have been more or less the same conflict as it is today, I think.
So not only do I disagree, I would put 5-10% on the demographics and 90% on the fact that they were Jews. But let's go to Turkey.
Wow,
Indeed,
damn.
as part of the collapse of empires all around the world and their replacement by nation states when they're lucky, just odd states when they're unlucky. Look, as I'm sure you know, as part of the carving up of the Ottoman Empire, there was supposed to be a Turkish state, a Kurdish state, and an Armenian state. And the Turks essentially rip up this idea. They do what they do to the Kurds. They do what they do to the Armenians. Turkey emerges as twice the size of what it was supposed to be. Kurdistan never emerges. Armenia ultimately emerges in another territory, which is not historical Armenia. This is what the Arabs tried to do to the Jews. They just were not as
videos in
successful
War
as the
Dead, yeah,
Turks.
obviously.
And you don't see that same kind of like global issue.
I get this is actually a good point. Damn, she's right. Damn. Yeah, we don't see this. I mean, we do see Kurdish terrorism in both Syria and a little bit more in Turkey, but I mean, clearly, yeah, it's not this as big of like a global issue.
The role that the Jew plays, both in the Western and Eastern Christian theology and in the Islamic understanding of the heart of their society, and just try to place it as some kind of European, then nothing gets understood. I would also add something else. I hope the Arabs are not people of slow understanding. So even if you were right, and initially they thought these are Europeans, even though, again, they knew very well, read the text in real time, they knew very well those were Jews. But even if they thought that those were some odd Europeans, you would think that given their experience in the last century, let's say they assume that we're like the British and the French, and they still sometimes make those comparisons and therefore just push them out through violence and they will ultimately go away. You would think that by now they would be clued in to the fact that the problem is that these are not Europeans, that these are Jews who have a historical and deep cultural and continuous connection to the land, something, by the way, which Arabs and Muslims knew until a campaign of erasure started for the last century. So you would think that by now they would figure it out. So, and yet...
Why would that make them comfortable splitting their land, though, with any people?
Because at one point, again, why are they special? Everybody
she's going to say everyone had to split it.
Yeah, but everybody fought over splitting their land. I agree, I understand they're not special. Yeah, everybody's special, but everybody fights over it, too.
Exactly, but at one point, people figure it out, they end it, and they choose a path in which, yeah, they don't get everything they want, but they get enough to have a state. But we, for some reason, still are stuck at a point where the vision is from the river to the sea. And I am arguing that if you take from the equation the fact that this is about Jews, you cannot account for why it continues so long with such ferocity and with no alternative voices, with complete dedication.
Steven?
I say to my point, you say to hers.
Is another place your bets? Oh, it's another bot, obviously. Awesome, dude. Dude, why are there I swear, up until recently, there have not been this many bots on Kick. I don't get it.
I also don't think that it.
Make Israel-Palestine one state, get the Palestinians reparations, protections, and they have to integrate into Israeli society. I don't know, why the Jews would ever trust it that it's possible after the Palestinians have been attacking them since 48. They don't seem to have really ever accepted the existence of Israel and have to continue to attack them. And there's a history of pogroms from Arab nations. I don't know why Jews would feel safe with that. And then also there aren't that many America's a good example of a multinational state. How many other multinational states even are there? Obviously European democracies are multinational to an extent, but it just doesn't seem like ethnic groups get along that well in other states.
Side's claims to never have to settle for peace for the other side.
Arabs that live in Israel don't give any problems.
The other side,
they're a minority. They're 20% of the population.
And apartheid, so why should we ever make deals with them? And then on the Jewish side, it's like,
they've assimilated.
Always rejected us being here. Oh, you're powered only by anti-Semitism. You just hate us because we're Jews. So why should we negotiate with you?
Netherlands and Belgium. Are they that multinational?
In terms of how you solve the problem. But then when I hear people bring out these historical arguments, I'm not even sure if they would accept the solution to the problem. Would you accept, for instance, a two-state solution that involves land swaps, so that 70%, is, I guess, up to 95 to 100% of the prior territory that would have been given to the Palestinians in 67, or what kind of deal, what kind of two-state solution do you think would look fair to the Palestinian side?
So those are two different questions. To your first question, of course, the reason that I do what I do is precisely because through a slow and painful process, I have come to understand that what stands between us and peace is not which way we will partition the land.
Dutch,
because from the
Turks,
Arab, Palestinian perspective,
Moroccans.
The top priority is no Jewish state. And when you're saying history is weaponized, first of all, as a parenthesis, one of the things that I find most difficult often with people these days is a complete ahistorical attitude. People say, just do things now. This is the
welcome
solution.
to the stream
Don't
right
mind
on
history.
LP.
Well, there's no such thing. People, individually and collectively, are their histories.
Sorry, I don't want to interrupt, but I do want to jump in.
Let me just finish the two thoughts. And again, you created a sentence that wasn't true. Because the Jews think that for the Arabs, their vision of the Jew plays a role in their ideology, they're not willing to compromise. But again, empirically, it's not true. The Jews have said yes to any two-state solution as long as one of the two is the
Those
Jewish
are
state.
what the fuck? Those are fake words, man. What the hell? What the hell?
Now, I'm not making a judgment in this call. You seem to think that I am.
What is
I'm not.
this?
This is a description, and this is a description that I have yet to see any Arab person, as opposed to any
It's some
Westerner,
Looney Tunes shit, bro. What?
contradict. They will say apartheid.
Oh, wait. I know a little bit about this. No, you're right, I guess. Sure.
But they will call. You seem to think that I am, but I'm not. This is a description, and this is a description that I have yet to see any Arab person, as opposed to any Westerner, contradict. They will say apartheid, but they will actually confirm that their opposition is to a Jewish state in any borders. Whereas here I am online, listen to me, I am confirming yet again that I am always happy to divide the land with the Arabs living in the land, to live in two states. But for that to happen, they need to actually want a state. The problem is that they've never wanted a state, not if the Jews also have a state. And the problem is that we often focus on the borders and the settlement and all that. But if you, the litmus test, and this is why I focus on it in my work and books, is this so-called idea of a right of return, which again is not a right, and the perpetual refugeehood, which is why in order to know if you found
She's not entirely wrong about this
who
one.
really wants peace, the question is, do you recognize the equal right, equal, not superior, not exclusive, again, the equal right of the Jewish people to self-determination in their historic homeland? And I will say, preempt that, I recognize the right of the Palestine Arabs to self-determination in the land. Yes, I do. The equal right to self-determination.
Okay, right.
I recognize the right to self-determination. But then they need to eye it, and they understand, their vision is to live in an Arab state next to a Jewish state and not from the river to the sea. And again, I'll preempt. I support living in a Jewish state next to an Arab state, not from the river to the sea. And then they need to understand, that the implication is that they are not multiple generational refugees living in the West Bank and Gaza, and that they possess no such thing as a right of return into the sovereign state of Israel. And I will again say, and I recognize that this means that the establishment of a Palestinian Arab state means that we have no rights to settle in that state.
I mean, I don't know how many. I don't know how many people argue that Palestinians have a the generational Palestinian refugees have a legitimate legal right to return to Israel, so much as it's just a sticking point in negotiations for a Palestinian state. Not necessarily a right that they still possess, because obviously it's been generations since the fucking 48 war. But Palestinians still, I feel like by now if people say right of return, they're not referring to a legal right that should be observed. They're just referring to in negotiations between Israel and Palestine for a state, that they would probably want Palestinians to have a right, or some Palestinians to have a right to go to Israel, even if it was I don't know, what didn't it, as in Israel suggested that they would let a symbolic 100,000 Palestinians, 100K right to return. I feel like that was Israel offered to allow 100,000 refugees to return on a basis of humanitarian considerations, or I feel like that was the biggest number Israel ever. Agreed to. Or Israel's first offer of any limited right to return was in 1949, 100,000. Yeah, wild. I don't know if they ever. My first party to see 150,000, 250,000 resettle an Arab nation.
He doesn't want to give us those rights. That's a truly mutual recognition of peace. And
I signed up for some fucking thing to read a paper. I still get so many emails about the right of return.
Publicly and in their own voice,
Watch.
sign on to that
Google.
declaration. I have found 3 courageous individuals.
More globalization.
So, yeah, I mean, I guess historical disagreements aside, I mean, I do agree with that. There's the elephant in the room that nobody seems to honestly want to engage with, is that it feels like there hasn't been Palestinian leadership that has ever truly accepted the existence of a Jewish state. There's kind of lip service paid to it, but hanging in the back of all these negotiations is always this idea of this kind of unlimited Palestinian right of return, where the number of refugees has been driven up so high. I don't know if it's 6-7 million now, that there's always an agreement for, okay, well, we'll accept this, that's fine. But also 7 million Palestinians need to have a right of return. And they're kind of sneaky with how they say this, because they'll say right of return to Palestinian lands, but Palestinian lands actually means the entire mandatory Palestine area, which means millions of Palestinians returning into Israel proper. And regardless of what anybody says, and you can go over all the talks and the different perspectives with Arafat. You can go over 2008, Olmert, and Abu Mazen. You can go over any of these talks. There has never, ever, not in the Arab peace resolutions on anything, there's never been a concrete number given of this is how many refugees we want to accept back, to go back to Israel. That's always left open. I think that after the Taba summit.
Yeah, look at all these fucking PDFs. Dude, the Israelis, right? Dude, like, I signed up to the site to read one paper, and they won't stop emailing a bunch of fucking papers, okay? Jesus. Like, what is this, Syrian refugees? Lives become hell. Lebanon Syrian refugees face growing hostility. What are the point of these?
It's chaos at the Aoun-Dadaad border, where over 1,000 people are crossing into rebel-held Syrian territory.
No shot they're going back to Syria. Is that bad? Goddamn.
In the crowd is Maher, with his wife and 3 children. This is the second time they've had to leave everything behind to escape war. The first was in 2015, when the family fled Syria for Lebanon. Now they are going back in the opposite direction.
I've been in Lebanon for 8 or 9 years working as a furniture painter. Now they're bombing Sabra, where I lived, so I decided to come back here.
The journey from southern Lebanon...
No shot. Syria is safer than northern Lebanon. Can you not just go north? No shot, dude.
They're leaving behind a life in exile, crossing the border back into Syria. Lebanon is where hundreds of thousands of Syrians escaped to during
Syria's
the war.
going back to normal? I mean, Syria has their, there's been a ceasefire since 2011 or something?
There's mixed feelings and a lot of uncertainty.
It's still...
Some don't have homes, nor jobs. But many say...
Or 2020? I thought it was later than that. UN ceasefire, I mean, it's been multiple, I guess.
Economic conditions that are driving them back.
I guess it is better to die there than to die here. The situation is difficult here. I can't even afford bread for my children. It will be the same there. At least there we can find a place to be buried.
The repatriation process is being organized by the governments in Lebanon and Syria. They insist.
Sometimes during Trump terms, ISIS power vastly reduced. Yeah, but there's still the Syrian government, and there's still the Kurds, and there's like
it lacks transparency. And
I don't know. Like I'm just used to the. I mean, I don't follow the Syrian civil war that much, but like the Syrian civil war was like so much more deadly than like all of the Arab-Israeli conflicts combined. Like, I think that literally, if I remember correctly, the Syrian civil war in like 10 years caused more casualties than the entire history of the Arab-Israeli conflict. I think it's like 5 million or something, right? Civilian deaths. Is this 6.7 million internally displaced. I think the worst fighting is over. Yeah, because ISIS is mostly gone, and really, I thought there were more. Is this really all the civilian deaths? I thought 306k death. I thought most of these were, maybe it's not civilian deaths. Maybe it's just total deaths, military and civilian. But like, it's wild. Yeah, but 6 million displaced internally, a further 6 million displaced externally, and now apparently some are coming back as they fled to Lebanon. Can anybody talk about something more interesting? Yeah, we'll talk about stuff way more interesting later on, like more consumer CPI, consumer price index stuff. Don't worry, Carter, we'll get there. Insanely interesting stuff. I don't know why my chat only watches me when I react to dumb Israel-Palestine shit, and never when I read very dense stuff about how CPI is calculated and about the current population survey. Dude, I started college like yesterday, and for whatever fucking reason, they still apparently this is a thing that the teachers still do, in college too. I don't know why. They should have stopped doing it after COVID. There's no excuse for doing it in college, where they're like, write an introduction and post it on the forum, and then reply to your classmate. Kill yourself. No, I'm not. Whatever. But I did it, and it was like, I actually joined for the dense stuff. Thank you, Red on LP. But I did it, and I think I listed it. It was like, list something interesting about yourself, and there's nothing interesting about me, bro. This is what I said in there. I said, I'm not an especially interesting person, okay? Ever since I graduated high school, I've done 2 things. 3 things, but I didn't mention the 3rd thing. Fucking game, fucking goon. I didn't mention the 2nd one. And read. That's all I've done. Literally nothing else, okay? So I was just like, yeah, I play video games and I read stuff that's only interesting to me, like how the current this is what I said as just an example. I said about like how the current population survey underestimates native-born employment because it fails to account for unexpected changes in foreign-born populations, such as the recent migration surge. And someone replied to that. I was like, they were just like trying to, they don't know what the fucking current population survey is, and they're just trying to like stretch the word count or whatever. They're like, it'd be interesting to compare the the current population survey to the 2020 voter registries to see if there was mail-in ballot fraud. I was like, what? Like, okay. I don't know. My guess is that they were just trying to shove something in there to make the word count higher so they could move on with their day. But it was wild.
I don't remember if it was the Palestinian negotiators or maybe it was, oh God, I forget the names. There's an Arab, that's not his name. In 2008, the negotiator that worked with Abbas, I think they said verbatim, like, why would we ever give up the right of a single Palestinian to return to the Israeli homeland? Like, we would never, ever compromise on that. And until there's like a reasonable settlement on that, obviously, the solution is out of grasp for both parties. My issue is just that I feel like both parties are fully incentivized to continue the conflict. Israel can always continue to expand into the West Bank and shore up their territorial, I'll say conquest, even though that's a trigger word. It's just kind of, solidifying their control of Area C. And for the Palestinians, they've never had to suffer a real political defeat.
Sort of for you, instead of political science, sort of political self-liability, because they always have time to do politics.
No matter what we do, no matter what happens, we can always go back to the pre-67 borders, no matter what. And as long as both sides feel like they don't really have anything to lose by continuing to fight, it would be irrational for either side to pursue a peace agreement. Like if you were a Palestinian, you said yes to a 2-state solution.
Where do I buy this? I want this. Just let me buy it. Let me buy it. Buy it. Let me buy it. Where? Please. Where? The link. Can you not buy this? You're gonna send me an email about this shit. I'm gonna have this fucking nice webpage. Where's the buy link? Where's the purchase? Where's the give you my money? Purchase. Buy. Why? What? I can donate, but I can't. Let me buy the shirt. College you rip off. People are not going to listen to your CPI calculations because it's literally propaganda. Once they enter the job market, you'll understand it's a lie. So true. None of the things I've read on CPI have been for college, by the way. I'm way ahead of the curve on that. I'm sure we'll learn about CPI in college at some point, but I already know exactly how it's propaganda because it actually is a really bad methodology for, calculating auto insurance inflation, and therefore it overestimates auto insurance inflation substantially, and it actually shows inflation as being artificially high. As economics major, I'm getting an associate's in science first, but it will be.
You would be an idiot because the ICC and the ICJ and the rest of the international community is eventually coming to save you, so why agree for anything now? And if you're Israeli, why would you agree to any kind of ceasefire or any kind of temporary or even long-term thing when, Iran and the rest of the world can still ship in, weapons to Gaza Strip or attack you or do whatever else, basically with impunity? Why would you agree to anything? And then you give up your right to kind of like settle into what I would say delusional Jews view as the historic, Judea and Samaria and their right to settle that homeland of the West Bank. So yeah, I think it's a big clusterfuck, but it's a bad, yeah.
What do you think about the West Bank Area C stuff, Einat? Stephen's saying that he holds Israelis accountable for their expansion and settlements in the West Bank. Do you agree or disagree with that being a problem?
I have to say, Stephen, we could have skipped over all what we spent so far, because once you said what you said, especially on the continued insistence on this idea of return, then that's basically my argument that there has never been any moment when there was an agreement for a 2-state solution when one of the Jewish. And you're saying that the Jews don't have an incentive.
Oh my God. Can you actually not buy this shirt? The shirt would be fucking awesome. But I guess you can. What the fuck? Is this there? This isn't the think tank's website, is it? This what? Apparently there is just an unrelated brand called Cato Fashions. Okay, that's awesome. Oh, that's it would be the base shirt. Arrgh.
That's so not true. Living like this is terrible. We would have wanted, with all due respect, and this is also to your question, Jake, to the West Bank, the vast majority of Israeli Jews could absolutely care less about it. And I even have recent empirical proof.
Wait, of the West Bank or of Gaza? Hold on,
this
sorry.
is also to your question, Jake, to the West Bank, the vast majority of Israeli Jews could absolutely care less about it. And
about the West Bank? I could see that argument being true about the Gaza Strip. There aren't like that many Zionists, unless you're like ultra hardcore like Zionists that want to fucking settle in the West Bank. But like, what? Is it like almost, I guess like literally almost a full percentage of the Israeli population lives in the West Bank settlements, right? I think it's like 700,000 settlers or whatever. I think that's about right.
Empirical proof, because you remember when people talk about annexing some areas of the West Bank after the Trump peace plan, and everyone talked about annexation. And I remember I participated in a lot of panels. Then I said, look, Israelis don't care about it. And then the
10%. Oh, wait, 700,000. Yeah, 10%. Hold on, not 1%, 10%.
Ambassador to the U.S. wrote a big op-ed, and he said, guys, how about you shelf this annexation idea and you get direct flights to Dubai? And Israelis were like, yes. Like, so the preferred and
is this including East Jerusalem, though?
For a century have been always peace over territory, as long as we have something to live in. But if we can have more peace and less territory, that has always been the revealed preferences of the Israelis. Whatever's happening in the West Bank is the direct outcome. And I'm sorry, but I love when people say, okay, just end the occupation now. And when I say, okay, but we need to understand why there's an occupation and why it doesn't end. There's an occupation because, again, the Arab world continued its wars. And whenever Israel tried to end the occupation, either unilaterally or in agreement, the Palestinians have made it clear that they're not interested in any agreement that establishes a Palestinian state in the West Bank and Gaza and thereby ends Israel's military place there, the occupation, if that means forgoing return, which is another way to say accepting a Jewish state. So we're stuck. But if tomorrow the Arabs of Gaza and the West Bank would rise up to say, we are done with our century-long war against Zionism. We have realized it's been a waste of time. We want to devote our resources to have a state next to the Jewish state. We're done from the river to the sea. We understand that we're not refugees multiple generations, and we possess no right of return into the sovereign state of Israel. We just want to live next to the Jewish state rather than instead of it. I can assure you that the next day there is a peace agreement. And again, not because the Jews are nice, but because we're small, and we are paying a massive price for the fact that there is no peace. But we have yet to be shown an alternative which does not demand death to Israel.
I mean, is it pronounced? It's Einat.
Einat, yes.
Einat. I'm hesitant to agree with Einat, but yeah, I feel like the most damaging thing that is happening with this conflict is the international community's involvement. Again, if you were a Palestinian trying to make peace today, I think you'd probably be assassinated, because why would you ever make peace when you know that Israel?
When you know that international community is always going to save you. State. But I mean, it's not entirely wrong. There's obviously bad incentives there for the Palestinians because they know the international community will always support their movement to go to reject peace and always or to negotiate peace on the basis of borders from at least one war ago. But I'm clear. I think it's pretty obvious to me. It's obvious to me that the Palestinians would have a better chance of securing a state, at least if there were to be a genuinely peaceful movement.
Depending on how this ICJ case goes, that maybe the ICC will swoop in and arrest Gallant or arrest Netanyahu, or maybe the surrounding Arab states will save us, or maybe Iran or the Houthis or Hezbollah or Hamas will come back, or something. Like, when you have all of these external forces that are basically saying fight, why would you ever make peace? And I think I feel like that's probably the number one obstacle right now to any kind of peaceful agreement being reached. It's just incredibly destructive, in my opinion.
But you still see the West Bank settlements as fundamentally problematic and not justified, right, Stephen?
The issue with them is that you get like a whole You could do like a whole thing on this. The problem is that what Anna said earlier is right. There's like different ways to have a conversation about what's going on in the Middle East. But one of the things that, and I've learned this recently, surprisingly, Jewish people, no offense, suck at communicating to the rest of the world. And Palestinians, because of what they've learned through Arafat and the Soviet Union, are so good at communicating with the Western world. And when you go to the Western world and you talk about peace between Israel and Palestine, it's always like, well, what are the land swap percentages? And what is transportation going to look like? And what are the borders going to look like? And from the history of agreements that I've seen in the negotiations, it was said that when Arafat went into negotiations in 2000, he didn't even have in mind like land percentages.
Yeah, he didn't know. He didn't ever actually have a good plan.
Oh my God, I'm forgetting all the names. So I've been so in American domestic politics. I spoke to Balin and I spoke to Shlomo Ben Ami, when they talked about negotiations and they talked about the different things that they were trying to do, they were saying that one of the big issues is that when Arafat would come in for negotiations, in his mind, he's thinking like 60-70% land, and then all of a sudden the Israelis are like, what about like 80 or 90? He's like, well, hold on, maybe we'll just wait and see what they offer. Because at the end of the day, I don't know if the land stuff actually matters. I think it has more to do with the concept of the state of Israel, because when you finally sit down and accept that Israel exists, what you're really saying is you've lost the 80-year conflict with the Jews, which sucks, and you're also saying we have foregone now all of our refugee right to return, which is a whole other conversation, but that's an issue that, regardless of your side, has been, through policy, dramatically inflated.
Arafat probably also just wanted to, unite the Palestinian movement behind it, because there were, other groups in the West Bank at the time, before Oslo 1, I think, if I remember correctly. That were, gaining prominence, and I think he just wanted to, I don't think he ever actually had a comprehensive peace plan. I think he probably just wanted to legitimize the PLO by being the one to negotiate with Israel.
I think it's Arab Resolution 1537, where they said that there's a reason why you have all of these Palestinian refugees that are living in places like Syria and Lebanon. It's because, and even in Jordan, right, people who are made citizens are still considered refugees. It's because a lot of these countries aren't even allowed to give citizenship to Palestinians. They're forbade expressly for doing it, so that the number can continue to grow, so they can always kind of be a thorn in the Israeli side when it comes to negotiations. So until there's some kind of pressure on,
I don't know what I research to find it.
And the Israeli leadership can be involved in this too, whether it's, as much as both sides seem to hate it, whether it's strengthening the Palestinian Authority, strengthening Mahmoud Abbas and his ability to be a leader or whatever. And I know that people don't like him for a variety of reasons.
Are you materialist or dualist, or lean towards materialism?
I think that this sounds horrible, and this is a crazy super Zionist position. And I'm not a pro-Zionist because I'll fight with Einat on her history. I'm probably going to fight later with Gideon on his history, or Elon Levy. Or wait, who are we talking to? Oh, Gideon. Yeah, I'll probably fight him on his history. The reality is in my opinion, the reason why the Jewish state was so successful is because it was sink or swim, right? Israel, the Arabs fought with the understanding or with the idea that, well, we can send them back to Europe, but the Jewish people that went there didn't feel like they had anywhere else to go, so it's either fight or die. And I think that encouraged them to be both pragmatic and ardent in their defense of their country. And for the Palestinians, they don't have that same pressure. They can just fight and fail forever and try and fail forever, and they'll always have, these backup international orgs to back them up. And that needs to disappear. There needs to be an impetus to actually negotiate and say, like, hey, if we don't figure this shit out now.
Crisis of the PLO boosted the chances of rivals in the territory, especially the Islamic organization Hamas and Islamic Jihad, who suffered no financial problems. Both Iran and Saudi Arabia continued to lavish budgets and gifts on them. And unfold this when not enough to force change of policies in the PLO. President Bush's electoral defeat by Bill Clinton dealt a serious blow to Palestinians and Arabs in general. The Bush-Baker team had no particular love for Jewish lobbies and was emotionally... What's up? Welcome back. And was emotionally deaf to Jewish and Israeli sensibilities. Clinton, however, lost no time presenting himself as a staunch friend of the Jewish people. Also was for Arafat a political maneuver aimed at recovering control of the Palestinian policies and affairs than a peace initiative. More a political maneuver than a peace initiative. He went to Oslo to save the PLO from declining into oblivion, not necessarily in search of a peace formula. Arafat needed to establish a foothold in the Palestinian territories at all costs, even at the expense of an agreement with Israel that did not secure vital Palestinian aspirations, such as the right of self-determination and the end of Israeli's policy of settlements, and an acceptable solution to the issues of Jerusalem and refugees. On these bones of contention, the Oslo Accords were either silent, vague, or ambiguous. Yeah, clearly, I think he just wanted to... he just wanted to be the one to negotiate with Israel than fucking... rather than, actually having a comprehensive peace plan. He just wanted to secure his own power for the most part. Good point, Benami. True.
Oh, we are totally fucked because that pressure isn't there.
And you still think what they're doing in the West Bank is wrong, or no? Yes.
I think I don't saying anything in this region is right or wrong is hard, right? Like the Gaza war, the civilian death is tragic there. But I mean, how many hundreds of thousands died in Yemen? What is it, 300 to 500,000 are dead in northern Syria? Nobody really cares. So it's saying right or wrong is not something I'm as interested in. I'm just saying realistically, the problem that I have with the West Bank, and Sharon saw this, and all the early Israeli leaders saw this. the idea that you can just take over the West Bank with this huge demographic problem and pretend that nothing is like wrong with that, like you're setting yourself up for more and more failure. I think Sharon was very smart to pull out of the Gaza Strip. I know that he wanted to pull out of the West Bank completely. I think he only got like 10 settlements out, but yeah, it's just making things more and more intractable is the issue. I think.
Let me jump in really quick. So, Stephen, something you said seems to conflict with an earlier statement. Maybe I'm just misunderstanding. Earlier, the first part of this call, you were disagreeing with Einat about why Arabs rejected Jewish settlements in Israel.
Before we get to this, I don't even know. I don't know. I need people to fucking pull me back in this, okay? Because at this point, I don't even know if occupying Gaza would be bad. Okay, I don't know. I don't have a strong position. I don't know. Like, if Hamas truly was, if Hamas is gonna keep diminishing in power, and the Palestinian Authority is able to take control of the Gaza Strip, if Israel controls the Philadelphia corridor and the Netzarim corridor and potentially other corridors, if they control those and they're willing to have like some amount of Palestinian sovereignty in the Gaza Strip in exchange for controlling those corridors, that'd just be better, right? Than if Israel would have continue to blockade on Gaza. They're probably going to be more comfortable letting aid in and stuff. Like the West Bank is occupied, but it's not blockade. It's not fucking blockaded to the extent that Gaza was. So long as there aren't settlements in Gaza, which some Israelis want to do, but I don't think most of them do. Would it even be that bad? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I don't think it'd be that, at this point, I don't think it'd be that bad. I don't know. Maybe I'm dumb, but why did you choose econ degree but not finance? Because finance is just boring. I'm more interested in I'm more interested in general macroeconomics than I am in just finance stuff. Sure, but I think it's currently unlikely for the PA to move to Gaza. I don't know. At this point, Sidwar is dead. Hamas's military capacity is significantly destroyed. I don't know. I think it's getting more likely. I don't know. None of the negotiations. Hedge fund job would be boring. Yeah, it would be. I think so. I don't know at this point. Finance is for market bros, econ is for market bros, and people interested in economy. True. I don't know. None of the negotiations in Egypt that Mike Pence went there. What the hell? Ever actually led anywhere to get the Arab nations to control the Gaza Strip? At this point, I don't know if Hamas can control the Gaza Strip. They have no fucking leaders anymore. Most of their military is gone. Most of the infrastructure in Gaza is gone. It's fucking 60% of homes have been destroyed. I don't even know where they would operate from or whatever. I don't know. I just don't know.
Einat was saying it.
I actually don't know. I don't know what the best case scenario would be. I'm just saying, previously I was occupying Gaza, would probably not be preferable. But at this point, I don't know. I actually don't know. Always see the Arab states protesting the situation in Palestine, but they absolutely refuse to take Palestinian refugees because the Palestinians cause all types of chaos in the country. It's true.
Because they're Jewish, and you were saying no, it's because they're people. They're just coming in. Why would you accept your?
I mean, the steel man, the good faith explanation is that they are worried that if they let Palestinians in, then they won't be able to return back. But
and then you said something more broad.
Well, many took Palestinian refugees in the past, but in this war they haven't really, right?
Which was that you stand against this categorization of Arabs.
I don't think Egypt has it all.
And that's not a mindset to get to peace. And yet, on the other hand, now what you're saying is,
how's you governments to destroy territory from that far away? What do you mean? Are you talking about if the Arab nations controlled it, or are you talking about if Israel controlled it? I mean, Israel's not that far away from Gaza. Israel's always going to view Gaza as some level of security threat. I think rightly so. They're probably going to be more comfortable letting dual use materials in, like concrete, that can be used for either humanitarian purposes to rebuild the fucking homes that have been destroyed, or to build tunnels. I meant PA. I don't know how I feel in that too. I don't think you're entirely wrong. They did before, right? They did before Hamas came to power, and there was the Hamas Fatah civil war. They did. until Hamas got elected and that the whole fucking civil war, right? But like, I don't know how I feel about that too. Like, maybe it would be better if Gaza and the West Bank were two different states. There was a like 3-state solution, like
Jewish statehood. So which one is it?
Well, hold on. I'm sorry. Let me be super clear. The Arabs have always rejected, to the enjoyment of Israel, have always rejected the existence of an independent Israeli state. Full stop. Period. There's a reason why Finkelstein or Wien Rabbani wouldn't answer that question when I asked, like, oh, well, how in 52, I think at Lucerne, they would have taken the Gaza Strip and 200,000 Arabs. In 47, they would have accepted a partition plan. In 67, they begged Jordan, hey, please don't attack from the West Bank. You don't want to do that. And they did it anyway. Like, that's always been a thing. So I'm not saying that Arabs have ever accepted some kind of like 2-state solution. Anna brought up earlier, the percentages that both sides were going to get. That really doesn't even matter. And in the West, they'll bring up, they'll say, well, they were going to give Jews 60% of the land, ignoring the fact that like half of this was the Negev, which is a fucking giant empty desert, right? But the reality is, even if they were given 5%, it would have been too much. They don't want any Jews here. I'm just saying that the fact that they're Jews, no offense, makes it so much worse, okay? Because historically, keep in mind that Jewish are seen as like a weak, dispossessed, scattered people that, mean and do nothing. And the Arabs see themselves as kind of like proud warriors. You've got 1,000+ years of your caliphates, of your empires, of all this. And to have these like, kind of weak, random people come in and not only establish a state, but then to do so militarily is unthinkable, and there's a whole deal of like generational.
Goddamn, she did it. She owned him.
Now,
they agree now.
Just because they're Jews, I think that was
destiny owned by the ultra Zionists.
Like, if somebody
Can't
came
believe
in
it.
and they beat the shit out of me in my apartment, I would be really, really mad if they beat me up, because I'd be mad that I got the shit beat out of me. But if it was no offense, but if it was a woman, I would feel that much worse. I'd be like, fuck, I got beat by a girl too. That's even worse. But the fact that I got there was the worst part. But it being a woman makes it even worse, right? Same thing with the fact that the Jews were the ones that came in and did it. I think makes it worse. I think if it would have been anybody, it would have been an issue. But yeah, sorry, it's a complicated issue.
I think Einat's also a feminist, in addition to being a Zionist, right? So watch out. Okay.
But I don't beat up anybody.
Yeah. So I understand that Israel imposed the blockade fundamentally for security reasons. That being said,
I can fix it.
Security for Israel, it also inflicts pain on some innocent Palestinians. I think Stephen would agree with this. And I think, Stephen, your position is that as a part of a peace solution, the blockade needs to be removed or reduced, because if you have a situation where a group of people is being oppressed, that's not conducive for lasting peace. Stephen, I'm trying to summarize.
Yeah, I'll get my take, and then and I can.
See Destiny versus Destroyer? No, I didn't. We'll watch it at some point, though.
Justification argument for it initially.
I need the reaction views, obviously.
Which I think if you look at everything that was being shipped in there from 2000 and onwards, right, from the Second Intifada onwards, I think you can make a strong argument that there's a good reason for the blockade to exist. However, I feel like it's important that Israel sends a message to the world and to the Palestinians that, like, hey, listen, as long as the security concerns are alleviated, like, we're willing to play ball, okay? So we went in, we did a massive, ground operation in Gaza. There was a lot of destruction, but we feel like we got rid of Hamas. So now the blockade goes away. If Hamas comes back, then the blockade goes back. When I think of the blockade, I think of like punishing. I got a 13-year-old son. They don't have punishments in mind longer. A 13-year-old longer than like 2 weeks. If you try to ground a child for like 4 months, that doesn't mean anything more than 2 weeks. They can only think like 7 days out. So I feel like with the blockade, it can't just be like a forever punishment, because if you're a Palestinian, you're like, okay, well, fuck, this sucks. But like after the war, when the rebuilding and everything happens, the blockade is lifted. As long as everything is like chill, hopefully that like drives people onwards, especially younger people, to be like, okay, well, maybe this like fighting all the time doesn't really get anything done, and now that we can actually ship stuff in here, this is like way better, and hopefully like alleviates that kind of like discontent that leads to people like Hamas and everything rising up. But that's my take on it.
So again, I'd like to empirically challenge the whole notion that the Arabs, the Palestinians, operate as a result of any economic hardship. You all know, of course, that just the massive massacres that were misnamed the Second Intifada happened after a period
misnamed the Second Intifada? What?
Like the notion.
I don't know if this is this Sinwar bodyguard. UNRWA. People think that he is a... I don't know if this is true or not. Reports from Gaza indicated the other terrorists killed in Sinwar's were Sinwar's bodyguard, one of whom worked as a teacher for UNRWA, and another was a high-ranking official in Hamas. I don't know if this is real or not. I'm sure we'll get more information right now. I don't want to just trust this fucking shit on Twitter. But this is... Oh no, what did Frogan say today?
Distress, thank you so much. I will never have any fucking pity for any fucking soldiers. U.S. military? Who fucking who? I hope you get PTSD.
Oh, but she's not bad.
Sometimes I'm like, whatever about the U.S. soldiers are the ones that like acknowledge that like what they did was wrong. They didn't know back then. Whatever. You're a good person.
What's your trust name? Frogan?
Like,
you don't know Frogan?
They get 10 gifted. So the U.S. military that are like, yeah, like, I did this back then, but now I know it's wrong. Like, I'm changed. Like, fuck imperialism. Fuck this. You don't deserve the PTSD. But like any other motherfucker, you're joining them. You're, oh my god, I want my fucking Camaro. Fuck you. I hope you get PTSD.
You hope. Wow. I saw I think it was Dan that made this site. He at least tweeted it out. DanClancySucks.com. Which like has all the links to Hassan saying absolutely unhinged shit. And then Dan Clancy like wishing him happy birthday and stuff. Frogan is insane. There's so many.
Ultimately, like if I were to do a charity thing where the charity thing relies on your donations, it should be something where
there's so many things Frogan does that's insane.
Feel good and are down for it. And like ultimately, regardless of what you think, that is not the situation here. So I personally donated 10K. Because I think it is worthwhile. And if you guys got some extra bread, I would recommend you donate. But I won't throw it on you, you know what I mean? No thanks. And some people are going to say that, you know what I mean? That's why it's the
This is a cracker take.
difference between like, hey, I can put my money where my mouth is, but I don't need to put your money there.
But this is A-okay with Twitch.
A fucking debate
Cracker
about whether that's worthwhile.
Take. Hey, I know Arabs are dying, but
it's wild. It's wild. It's wild. Also, in the Asmon ban, he probably deserved to be banned. I mean, like, what he said is unhinged. Now, it's wild that he was banned. But, like, Hassan isn't or anything, but...
that the Palestinians will not engage in suicidal actions because they will have something to lose was literally disproved. But I want to read something to you from today. There aren't a lot of critical Palestinian voices from within Gaza, but this is one of them. His name is Ibrahim Ibrash, and he basically says, if we tell the truth, on the eve of October 7th, there was extensive economic activity in Gaza.
But did he say that all those haven't? Who is all those?
Every day there was a new mall, a car exhibition, new towers, new places, new restaurants being opened. He even says that a delegation from Sudan that visited Gaza said that if this is what an Israeli blockade looks like, they
I agree with you. Like, yeah, like they should. It's wild that he got banned, but Hassan can do literal fucking terrorism propaganda, dude. You know what's insane? Okay, I've said this before. Okay, what Asmongold did was bad, but he's not fucking cowardly about it. Okay, when Hassan brings on, I think his name is Nick Merckx or whatever, right? I talked about this before. Hassan brings on Nick Merckx, who doesn't know anything about, who doesn't like know basically anything about like Israel-Palestine, and goes and like just says to him, the Houthis. It's not Nick Merckx. Isn't his name Nick or something? I don't know. Did he get part? No, just a 14-day ban. Hassan will bring on like an uneducated person on his stream, and be like, yeah, bro, the Houthis are enforcing their territorial waters. You know, they're just saying until the genocide in Gaza stops, they're just going to not let Israeli ships through. As if this is some type of legitimate action that the Houthis are taking and not fucking terrorism, which is in a breach of international law. These aren't, first of all, it's innocent passage, even if it was... even if it was Yemen's territorial waters or the Houthis' territorial waters, like they can't fucking shoot Israeli ships. Hassan would never apply that same logic to the U.S. when the U.S. targets like economic targets. When the U.S. does sanctions on Iraq, for example, which I'm pretty sure he's fucking opposed to. Two, the Houthis aren't Yemen. They're not the government of Yemen. But Hassan knows this. Hassan knows this. He's just a fucking coward. And instead of doing what Asmongold does, which is say is like unfiltered take. Hassan's unfiltered take being, I support terrorism against Israel because I think Israel's evil. He's too cowardly to actually say that. So he fucking lies to his guest. He lies to his viewers. It's wild. Well, I was going to say that was even that bad. That like he said that Palestinians deserve to be genocided because they're from an inferior culture. Like
we know it cut down their economy.
It's worded badly, but he said nothing bad. Well. He didn't say that. That is almost exactly what he said. He said they're from an inferior culture and they have genocide baked into the culture, so he's not going to feel bad that if they are genocided, right? Am I getting that right? I'm pretty sure that's almost exactly what he said.
Based on,
What?
we know that the blockade reduced the Gaza economy significantly, though. I mean, the report, I think, is that's a demonstrable, I think.
It's actually not anecdotal, but again, it's one that it actually shows on the eve of October 7th, the Human Development Index of Gaza is better than about 90 countries. The notion, and this again goes to the beginning of our conversation, the fact that there is economic success or more money or less money, more settlements, less settlements, all of these things have exactly zero impact on the Palestinian ideology of no Jewish state. The Palestinians could have made a choice. The blockade begins 2 years after Israel fully withdraws from Gaza. Gaza actually started shelling Israel already from 2001. The fact that Israel got out, they continued shelling Israel. It's only in 2007. And yet people, one of the things that often people do is reversal of cause and effect. The people of Gaza had a choice. They could have taken, finally, the first time that they control territory, that the Arabs of the Levant finally control territory.
Singapore, say it.
Of the Mediterranean. I was working with Shimon Peres at the
Ah,
time.
you stated Singapore, Middle East, said Pearl of the Mediterranean.
Money, individual people to give all the agricultural places so that the Palestinians can continue to export.
I don't think it. Link the clip. I'm pretty sure what he basically said is that like he's not going to feel bad about mass killing if it's from people of an inferior culture, whatever.
Culture from the Gaza Strip, and the first thing they did is to destroy all of that. So there is actually, at one point, you need to respect them and take them at their word. But I will add to that I completely agree with Stephen. There's a wonderful piece recently written by my colleague, Dr. Shani Moore, on the 4 failed concepts that led to October 7th. And the fourth one, the third and the fourth, talk about the completely destructive role of the international community that has basically constantly, like Stephen said, allow the Palestinians to continue to believe that they can imagine a Palestine from the river to the sea. I was recently in a terrible conference that was under the message of to heal. And it was all this like blah, blah healing stuff with Israelis and Palestinians. And at one point I said, look, in order to heal, the part of the wound has to be over, right? You do not begin the healing when people are still shooting. You need to know that the shooting is over, and then you begin to take care of the wound. The biggest tragedy in this conflict is that again and again, I think this has to do with the role of the Jews in the Western imagination, again and again, the Palestinians have been saved, but not really saved, indulged in not embracing defeat. I'm using the title of a book about Japan post-World War II. People...
we'll get to that in a second, Yumi.
Sometimes cringe from hearing it, but
so I
want to move forward.
It's easier to edit. It's easy to edit if we talk about this afterwards. That way I have like one segment of this, one segment of... Well, we can talk about it in a second. Okay.
Every time
12
in
minutes.
history, you often have to accept that you are defeated. The Arabs have to accept that insofar as their goal has been to prevent a Jewish state in any part of the land, in that aspect, they were defeated. They should put a line on it. They should embrace that defeat and begin to develop a vision of living next to a Jewish state rather than instead of it. The day they do that, I can assure you, they will be sovereign. There will be no blockade. There will be trade. There is nothing more than we want than the Arabs around us to finally decide that they want to live next to us rather than instead of us. We'll be happy to just live together and trade and be at peace. That's all we want.
By the way, well, I mean, I'm pretty sure there's some truth to this of this happening in the West Bank in the past. I'm fairly certain any economic relations Israel establishes with Gaza or with the West Bank is just going to be, it's only going to be interpreted by people that Israel is like exploiting the cheap labor in the Gaza Strip or in the West Bank. That's how it's going to be interpreted. That's how it will always be interpreted.
But Stephen, you disagree. You think the blockade should go
Which
sooner
there could be some truth to.
I feel like it should go as a show of good faith. I do agree that there is a negative ethos, a very heavy ideology that kind of powers the people there in terms of wanting to fight and resist forever. But I mean, you've got a new generation of people. It was said that Arabs would never make peace with Jews, but it's happened with the surrounding Arab states. Now there's a different situation with the Palestinians, obviously, because there's contested land, but I think it's possible. But people need to be shown that there's another way to live. People have to be shown that there can be something different besides the constant fighting. And one thing that I discovered myself.
But they were shown that. I mean, I have to ask, at one point, how many times, that's the thing that drives me crazy, how many times do you have to show good faith again and again? We negotiated. We got out of the Gaza Strip. How many times do we need to show good faith until it is understood that for the conflict to end, the ideology that wants nothing less than no Jewish state anywhere between the river and the sea, that ideology has to die? And as soon as that ideology dies, there will be no blockades, no occupations. There will be none of that.
Okay, this is the description I'll go. So description, not prescription. So I'm not making a moral judgment. But what I will say is that Israel enjoys broad support from the West and from the United States especially, because the vision that people have in Generation X and above of, people in their 40s and older, is Israel was the single democracy in the Middle East in a sea of enemies that managed to exist, survive, and then eventually thrive as an ally to the United States. And that's like the impression, I think, that is in a lot of people's minds. For my generation and younger, when you think Israel, you think, oh, those are the people that terrorize Palestinians. That's the only impression that people have in their mind. Because no one else is attacking them except for Iranian proxies who are whatever. And then you've just got the Palestinians. If that situation persists, I think that it will see a marked decrease for Israeli support from the West. And I think that Israel will find itself backed into a corner that it won't be able to get out from. Because once you've lost that support, and then once you, God forbid, if you were to start losing the support of surrounding Arab states, the situation would become dire. So I agree that it sucks, and it's definitely not a fair situation in a variety of ways, of course. But I mean, like Olmert said this to me like 30 times, right? You don't make peace with friends, you make peace with enemies. There has to be some path, and Israel has to be like a trailblazer here. Like it has to be, not like, well, we'll accept peace if you guys want to come to us and actually make an agreement, and until then we're going to be happy to kind of like do as we are, because I think that path that Israel is on is not a good path. I think that it would be very bad. I'm not arguing that it's fair or anything else. I'm just saying that I think that something has to be.
It's complicated because I know there's quite a few people in Israel who are fucking opposed to peace and want full sovereignty over the West Bank. But I'm pretty sure even Netanyahu took a proactive step towards peace. I think in 2009 or whatever, he did a settlement freeze, or it might have been 2010. He did a 9-month settlement freeze or something, to try to get peace negotiations going on, but it did not end up working.
There. And it probably is going to require aggressive measures from the Israeli side through diplomacy, through peace, through a combination of things, military included, in order to make that work. Or if not, I got a lot of trouble for saying this a year ago, blow them all up, either move them all out or make peace with them. But this in-between land is it's keeping a wound open forever. It's like a necrotic flesh wound.
Destiny hates peace.
You can find a way to cure it and make it good, or you can amputate, but you can't.
Was it this? 10-month settlement freeze 2009. Yeah.
Can't leave it there, because all it's going to do is rot and grow and eventually lead to your death, which I think is what's happening right now. So there has to be some.
But I guess Palestinians, it didn't include East Jerusalem, when did Israel annex East Jerusalem?
Has to happen. Yeah.
But, I think he's saying, and then we can wrap up, is that even though Israel has done goodwill in the past, they still have to remove the blockade to give the Palestinians a feeling that they can have a good life, and the blockade diminishes that. I know.
Not when they occupied it. When did they full and annex it? Because at some point they occupied the West Bank, but Israeli basic law doesn't apply to the West Bank the same way Israeli basic law applies to the Golan Heights, which they did officially annex. And I'm pretty sure they did the same thing with East Jerusalem, but I don't know when.
Now, you gave the story about how their economy is better than 90 countries, but there's demonstrable evidence that it does weaken their economy. I don't know by what exact number. I mean, do you think it doesn't hurt their livelihood, the blockade? Or
I think the blockade is incredible, is a subset of the fact that their priority for the last century has been to not have a Jewish state. I'm saying if their choice would have been
1980, the Knesset ratified basic law in Jerusalem. Okay, there we go.
Or would be at any point to prioritize having a state next to the Jewish state, there would not be a need for anything, because there would be peace. So the quite inefficient blockade was merely the result of the fact that despite Israel showing goodwill, trying, by the way, to cut the flesh wound, to completely get out of Gaza, to show goodwill, to allow them to control territory without agreement, and just have them run with it, what have they done? They have turned it into a weaponized, integrated area for the purpose of liberating Palestine from the river to the sea, and their wording of no Jewish state. So every time you focus on blockade, settlements, all of these, I always go back to the foundational issue. It's the ideology, and the ideology has to die.
Palestinianism, say it again, say it again.
Ideology, like the defeat of Nazism, the defeat of Japanese imperialism. Some ideologies need to be defeated, and if I may, Olmert is wrong that you make peace with enemies. You make peace with defeated enemies. You make peace with enemies who have embraced defeat, that have accepted that the war is over, and then you begin the negotiations of peace. That has always been the basis for enduring peace. That's how we get to something. And I agree with you, Stephen and Jake. I want something to happen. This is why I keep on focusing.
Well, this is the Destiny meme right on. Nobody wants peace. They want justice. They want a peace, but they want that peace, on the terms that they feel are just. Israel doesn't want peace. It wants a just peace. If Israel Ukraine just completely surrendered, there'd be peace. Obviously, it wouldn't be a just peace, though. Ukraine would be, totally annexed. Israel and Palestine equals angry birds. True. That's the big thing. Yeah, everyone wants justice. Watch him. He's going to say it. Watch him. He's going to say it. I've watched enough Destiny debates. I can read him like a book.
That has repeatedly
wonder if Destiny was the bottom.
Final thoughts, Stephen?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I necessarily disagree. I guess the only thing that is kind of depressing is that when I talk to Palestinians, I can get a lot of agreement on the side that Israelis need to do a lot more work, and the Palestinians, have obviously suffered a great deal over the past 80 years for a variety of reasons. But anytime I suggest, well, maybe the Palestinians should do a little bit, it's like I'm met with the harshest pushback, like, no, fuck that, we're not going to do anything. And then sometimes I feel like when I speak on the Israeli side, it feels kind of similar, where it's like, well, the Palestinians obviously have messed up a lot historically, but when it's time for Israel to do anything, well, no, fuck that, we probably fuck them. And it's like, okay, well, it feels like as long as both sides have those like narratives kind of like stuck in their head, not to say I'm drawing a false equivalency a bit between the crimes of both sides, but yeah, I guess it just feels intractable when the thoughts are like that, I guess, on both ends, yeah.
Is it intractable, Einat? And your final thoughts?
If there will be a Palestinian state, do you consider feasible to lead Palestine state, get progressive laws implemented by the use of pressure from other countries? It wouldn't be feasible. I don't think it would be feasible, but...
I draw hope from history, from the fact that a lot of bad ideologies have ultimately been defeated in history, replaced by different ideologies. We have to admit that sometimes wars have been important. Wars, defeat, have been important in order for people to understand that ideologies have been wrong. So I draw inspiration from the fact that people change, nations change. I believe that the Arabs and the Muslim world can embrace the existence of a Jewish state, not just reluctantly, but actually as part of a full and proud Arab and Muslim identity. And ultimately, I think that it's a tragedy that the Palestine Arabs have been ultimately indulged for so long in the ability to avoid accepting and embracing the fact that the goal of from the river to the sea is not going to happen. They can live next to a Jewish state rather than instead of it. The day that we will have a plurality, I'm not just even saying the majority, the day that we have a plurality of Palestinians that accept it, I can assure you, is the day that we will be able to negotiate peace.
And with that, thank you both so much for your time. I'm going to end the...
Damn. Angry Birds Peace Treaty.
Dear friends, after too many years and too many victims, I believe we have reached an agreement that will put an end to the senseless conflict.
Think Israel and Palestine should be before. Yeah, we should annex Israel, make it a first state.
The UN will guarantee the defense of the pigs from any aerial attack, while the birds will get most of their eggs back.
What the fuck, dude?
Say what? Fuck off! Friends, please put the anger behind you.
What the fuck, man?
Friends, put the anger behind you. Please.
It's all good. It's all good. It's all good. It's all good.
Gentlemen, please, let's not spoil the historic moment. Please.
The real place we should annex is Canada, true. And Mexico, too. And, fuck it, all the way down to the Panama Canal.
Say what? Fuck off! Say what?
Oh my god.
Put the anger behind you. Come on, we're expected at the upper land for the ceremony. Please. Gentlemen, please.
This is good.
Stand here, please.
What the fuck? What the fuck?
Oh no. Is it another kickbot? It's a kickbot, damn.
Hello, get me on the first flight to Finland. These people are insane. Business class, of course.
Damn. I can't believe the Israelis would do this. If you want to chat with me live, sub here or go to Nonfon 420 on Twitch or Kick via the links below. Once again, please like and sub to help with the algorithm, and consider sending a donation through YouTube Super Thanks to directly support me, and I'll make sure to reply to any question you ask. See you guys next time.